Hello, fellow travelers, and thank you once again for joining me on the Unbroken Ground. My name is Paul, and this is episode 44, and it is simply going to probably be titled "Why Are You Not a Pastor?" And yeah, that's going to be if you've been listening, episodes 42 and 43 were just kind of me reminiscing about my life and how I got to where I got. And so this will be the last in the series. I'm not going to go any further than this one. And so this will not take me to modern day necessarily, but it will at least explain some parts of who I am and what I do and why. So I do want to give a shout out if you've been paying attention much to the podcast lately. I did have a couple of special episodes, one with Jim, who has been a regular guest and done some different things with him. Excited for him to be just do kind of a straight interview, no funny questions, and that one's done very well. And then, of course, I had my friends Travis and Olivia come over, and we did a three-person podcast, and that has set the record for the most downloaded podcast in the first week, but also just altogether. It is the most downloaded episode, so that's really cool, and congrats to them. I know that Travis has dreams of starting his own podcast, so hey, keep your eyes out. Maybe we'll be doing something again in the future, or maybe I'll just stick around and produce some of his stuff. So if you're, this is probably the one time that you're sad that I don't do a video podcast, because as part of my hanging out with youth, we had a Halloween party tonight at the church youth group that I help with, and I am wearing my Christmas sweater that has a Tyrannosaurus Rex on it falling, trying to put a star on top of a tree, and I wore it ironically. So sorry that you can't see that. Maybe I'll post a picture sometime in the future so that you can see that. But yeah, we're going to jump in here and just kind of take off. So again, if you haven't listened to episodes 42 and 43, then this might pick you up in a weird place, because I'm going to be taking off from where I left off in episode 43. I guess 41, 42, and 43. So 3 episodes. So this will be episode 4, but it'll be the last one. So check those out, and yeah, let's jump in. So I kind of left. I said we were going to leave us on a cliffhanger of basically where Callie and I we'd met. We'd been married. We were both graduating from seminary. So we both went to Logsdon Seminary, which was it's no longer a seminary. It was a Baptist seminary on the Hardin-Simmons campus. For those keeping score at home, in case I forgot to mention this, that is where I thought I was going to go to college, but that's not where I ended up. But I did end up there for seminary. It was an amazing place. It was an awesome. I mean, it's the place that Callie and I met. If we hadn't both shown up at seminary at exactly the same time, we would not have met each other. Most likely, I guess the way the world works, we could have, but we wouldn't have been married. And yeah, 18 years later, life would look very different for me. I have no doubt. So we were graduating. I was graduating with my master's of Divinity, which is the full workload, about 90 hours there from Logsdon Seminary, of theology and Bible classes and that. And Callie had started to get her MDiv, but she actually switched to get her master's of arts in family ministry, which is a little bit less theology and more psychology in some ways. And yeah, but we both were graduating in the winter, so December of, that would have been December 2000 and, man, I'm really bad at dates, 2008 or 2009. We got to graduate at the same time, which was kind of fun, but it was very disappointing for Callie because she was in a different school, basically the Master of Arts, Family Ministry, which again included some psychology. It was a little bit different than the Masters of Divinity, and so they actually had somebody else get a Master's of Arts that got their name called in between us. So Callie graduated, got her name called. Another gentleman got his name called, and then I got my name called. So she had originally thought that it'd be kind of this cool thing that we would both be walking across the stage back to back, since we had the same last name. But it didn't work that way because, well, I guess the gentleman didn't have a Master of Art family. She was the last Master of Arts family ministry, but then we had another guy get his Master's of Divinity, and his name was in between ours. And so it didn't quite work like the fairy tale I think that Callie had planned. But that's okay. We were graduating. I had been pastoring at this church. And it was, it was a very interesting place. I kind of went through that last week but it wasn't, it was not a place that was really built to grow, and people really were not, really wanting to grow. It just wasn't a place, it was in the country. It was surrounded by other Baptist churches. It was not the main draw by any sense of the imagination for and a lot of people drove out there from where it was a 20-minute drive from Abilene, and so it just wasn't a viable place to continue for much longer. And so I just began to pray and ask God to say, all right, God, I'm about to graduate. Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? Again, if you've listened to some of the other podcasts, that's a common theme, that I'm willing to go wherever God wants me to go. That's what I want to do. That's where I want to be. I want to be like Moses. When Moses says, God, you take me wherever, but just make sure that if you're going to take me wherever, that your spirit is where is going before me, and that's how we get to where we need to go. And so began praying, and there was a church in San Angelo. Now, again, San Angelo is where I spent my undergrad at. That's where I lived for 6 years, loved it, loved being in San Angelo. Callie liked San Angelo, and so I started talking to this church, and we went through the whole process. I did an interview, and then I preached for the search committee at another church, and then I had a second interview, and everything seemed to be as far as I could tell. There was no red flags on my part, but and everything seemed to be going forward, and except for this one issue, which was very strange to me because I really didn't have a strong take on it one way or the other. And they were very concerned about the style of music. And I'm about to go down a huge rabbit trail here, so sorry if you've heard this before, know this, or had never lived it and don't care. I'm going to go down it anyway. So, when I started in college, summer camp music had just been making its way to come back to regular congregations. And you saw, especially in the South, especially San Angelo, just Texas in general, though, you saw places that if you move from just doing piano organ hymns, in the hymnal and the songs, and I love hymns. I grew up singing hymns. There's a bunch of hymns that I love, can still sing from heart and memory, and nothing against hymns. But what happened is that churches began to get people who could play acoustic guitar, people who and drums and electric guitar and bass, and started to do the kind of worship that people had experienced at camp, and decided to bring it back to every Sunday. And San Angelo had probably the first church that did it. Just blew up with people just leaving other churches. I mean, not necessarily, and so this is where you have to be honest, right? It's not necessarily growth because new people are showing up at the church, although some of that probably is true. But really, it was people who decided that they wanted to sing that style of worship that they got to sing when they were away at camp, who grew up there going to camp as high school students, and now who were kind of the adults making the decisions. They wanted to have that kind of music at their church, and so Glen Meadows was one of the first places, just blew up, just filled, just became big. And so everybody that was around kind of were like, yeah, this is something that we have to at least consider or think through the implications of having praise and worship versus regular hymnals. Now, some of you are like, well, you've already muddled things here, because the hymnals are praise and worship. They are songs of praise. They are songs of worship, and I 100% agree with you. However, we're talking styles here, and what happened is that those churches that wanted to grow, right, wrong, or indifferent, if you wanted a quick way to grow, which is probably wrong, and very not indifferent, but if you wanted a quick way to grow, in the early days, you could change your music. And if you did so, then you were on the cutting edge, and you just attracted people. And now, there's a lot of that things go through cycles, and so, but, so that would have been early days, 1998, that's when I was headed to college. That's kind of when I began to sense that and see that. Of course, I grew up in this tiny, small town, and we didn't do that technology, that worship. We just didn't do that except on Sunday nights with the youth, and we went to camp, or when we had a Disciple Now or something like that. That's when we would have that kind of music, and we loved it, but there just wasn't. That's just not what you did on Sunday morning, and kind of. Some of the more charismatic churches that like the Vineyard, and those that kind of put out praise and worship, they kind of pushed against the more conservative Baptist, who were less about the Spirit leading, but were like, yeah, we do like to sing these kind of songs. We do want to step out of the old tradition. And so then it became kind of a worship war. And you had people lining up, worship songs are too repetitive, and other people going, well, hymns are just too dull. They don't have any emotion whatsoever. They're not, and worship songs really speak to me, and they're how I worship. And in the end, I think it was wrong on both sides, because what we did in a lot of places is that we decided that the more than likely, and this is a grand generalization, so sorry about that. I don't really have enough time to talk through all the different, but just kind of a very brief overview of what kind of happened in Baptist life, particularly, which I don't go to a Baptist church anymore, and so I'm still ordained in that, but I'm not. Anyway, what we said, whether we meant to explicitly say it or just what was said implicitly, which implicating what we implied with what we did and how we did, was that we were pretty convinced that the older people were going to come to church no matter what. And they did, for the most part. Whether we sang hymns or whether we sang praise and worship songs with a guitar, the older people were going to be there, because they had this, they were already committed and bought in, right? And so then the people who had kind of the vision, they said, well, if we update the music, we'll still have the old people, because the old people will still be there, because they're not going anywhere. They'll outlast us all, stubborn as they might be. But we can start to see attracting some younger people and growing in that area. And I do think that the original idea was that it would be, new converts. It would be people who didn't know Jesus, and then suddenly like, wow, this is music. It's not just kind of stuffy theological hymns and all that kind of stuff. And so we kind of made this demarcation a little bit, that was like, well, we know that the old people would really like us to just continue to sing these hymns, but they're going to come regardless. So we don't have to meet their needs. In worship, we can just do what will grow the church younger, which we do. The churches need to grow younger. That's just the nature of what it means to have a church and to grow and those type of things. Is you do have to continue to get younger, because the old people, as natural life takes its rotation, those people are going to no longer be at church one day. Their money will no longer be there. Their time, their resources, their bodies, their hearts, their wisdom will no longer be there. And so you do have to have a way to capture the younger generation. And this was a way. So down that rabbit hole, that started happening around 1998. But whether or not churches stepped into that was really dependent upon which church you were at, how big it was, and who was in leadership. And so one of the questions that I really didn't care. Like I say, I love hymns. I worship the hymns. I love blended services. I love full-on praise and worship choruses and songs, today's songs. All of those things, I'm like, yeah, I can meet God here. Oh, yeah, I can meet God here. Oh, yeah, no, I can meet God here. So I didn't really care, but they were very concerned. I believe almost overly concerned that I, being young, and I'm putting young in quotations here because I started seminary when I was 25. I graduated when I was 28, almost 29. And so they were very afraid, I think, at the end of the day, that as a young guy, quote unquote, I was going to bring in some praise and worship music and just change their whole style. And they didn't want that. And what I said, the way that I answered that question, because they're very like, well, what kind of music are you going to bring in? And I was like, I don't know. I would want to do whatever the congregation wanted me to do, because I believe in the Holy Spirit moving throughout the whole congregation. We're all in the priesthood of believers, that we all have a say in what is going to happen. And so I'm not going to come in and just say, well, we're going to do wholesale changes and be praise and worship. But I'm also not going to say that we won't do that we'll only have hymns, because it's not really up to me. It's not about my preference. It's about what God's doing in the church. It's about what God's got going on in the hearts of the people. And so I was like, I can't tell you. And I think that was enough of a non-committed answer, which was true. It was a very true answer. I really, literally did not care. I literally was not going in to come in and demand one way or the other, or uphold one or the other. But that lack of solid, I tell you what I'm going to do and we're not going to change from that, was enough of a variable for them to be uncomfortable with moving forward with me. Even though we had gotten to the point that I had done a couple of interviews. I had preached for the search committee. I mean, at that point, is usually in that faith tradition is to go in front of the congregation, preach a sermon in view of a call, and get voted on. And that December 31st or January 1st, one of those days, I can't really remember. Just know I think it was New Year's Eve. I got a call from the chairman of the search committee, and he was like, yeah, we're just not going to go with you. And that was it. So Callie and I had, at this point, kind of thought that that's where God was leading, and we prayed about these things. God opened the doors for the interview, and I mean, to go back to St. Angelo, where there were still people there that I loved and I cared for, and I knew the town, and I knew a lot of people in the churches, and I'd get to serve alongside those people and be part of this community that I was a big fan of, that I had served already. I was all in on that. That's where I felt like God was leading me. I felt like that's what God wanted. There was no hesitation on my part about moving there and moving on to be the next steps. That was going to be my next step. I was going to graduate from seminary. We were then gonna go to San Angelo, and even up to the point that I had already put in my resignation at the other church I was at. Now, to be fair, I was probably not going to stay there much longer anyway. It was, again, it was not a place that was built to succeed or grow. It was just some people who were holding on to a location and a place that probably would have been better served to combine with another one of the churches you drove past to get there. But it was their church. It stemmed from. So I don't think if you didn't grow up in the South, what you don't understand, or what it's hard to understand, is that they're literally in the North, or even in like the Midwest I'm in now, there are literally like pubs in every little town. Maybe one or two pubs in every little town. Well, in the South, there are literally one or two churches in every little town, sometimes more than that. So whereas in the Midwest, like living in Illinois as I do now, I can drive around even to little towns and I'll see little pubs or see, bars. That you would see churches on every street corner. That was the culture, and you would not see pubs, bars, stuff like that. So it was a place that God was already saying, yeah, I think we're moving on from here, and I think we'd prayed about it, and we just thought, yeah, San Angelo's, that's where God's calling us. And so in January, January 1st, new year, new plans. I mean, that was the plan. I was going to be a pastor. I was going to go and serve this church in San Angelo. I was going to connect with all the people that I could connect with. I was going to connect with I was a youth minister there. I was going to reconnect with some of the youth and that now that had become adults and invite them to be part of a church because they are having a hard time finding places like that. My heart and my desires, my vision, my everything was headed that direction. And December 31st, with one phone call, that door was closed. And we didn't have a backup plan. We didn't have a plan B. We didn't know. We just were so sure that we were headed towards San Angelo, that I was going to be a pastor, and that's what I was going to do for the foreseeable future. And the door was closed. It was hard. We started over from square one, and if you've never either been on a search committee or you've been a pastor looking for a job, pastor jobs they're not quick. Churches, especially with committees and holidays and people in and out and being so busy, it takes quite a bit of work to figure out if a church is going to speak with you, and then figure out how to speak with you, and do the interview, and then listen to the preaching, and then it's not a quick process. And so Callie and I both had, kind of tentatively, I definitely put in my 2 weeks notice, and Callie had put in a tentative notice at her work too. Although I don't think it was quite as like, this is the day, just more of, hey, this is something that's going on. And so I graduated. We were graduated. I thought I knew where I was headed, and I had to start over at square one. And so that's what we did. And I just began to start looking again. All right, God, I thought I knew where you wanted me to go, but that wasn't it. Where do you want me to go? I want to go where you want me to go. God, show me. and I started, that's full on panic mode at this point. I mean, January 1, I don't have a job, not going to school anymore. Callie is kind of still working. I think she didn't officially, and she could have. I think if she had said, "Hey, I'm gonna come back and work for you guys," just kidding on that, they would have definitely taken her back. She was working for a home health care like scheduling thing, and they were very happy with the work she did, and so we could have stayed, but it was just I graduated. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to go on to the next step. I'm ready to go to the place that I think God has me. And then that door just closed. And so I began searching again. And one of the things that I remembered, since I had worked for my friends David and Rosie up in Colorado, was that Christian Camping and Conference Association. It had now changed from Christian Camping International, CCCI, to CCCA. And I remember that they posted jobs. And so on a lark, I got on there and I looked, and lo and behold, there was a camp job for a husband and wife. And, for Callie and I to both graduate from seminary, we weren't really sure what that was going to look like. Callie was pretty committed to just, being whatever she needed to be to support me as a pastor, and kind of me being more the breadwinner. For a while there, we were trading off between who was making the money. So I would get a job and she would get a job. And then, and so it's really her turn. She hasn't taken her turn back, so I'm a little disappointed about that. But she was ready. She was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with my degree, but more than anything, I just want to, I've married you. I'm going to be a pastor's wife. I'm going to do that. And I was like, cool. I don't know. So I was like, I don't know, we'll figure it out, with all the optimism of youth and not knowing what the future holds. I was like, we'll figure it out. No problem. No worries. Right. And, so it was really cool. So it was like, yeah, this camp is looking for a husband and wife. And they need a program director and a maintenance guy / cook / I don't know, what other skills do you have? And that literally is kind of the way the job description read. And so I was like, you know what? I cooked at the bed and breakfast in Colorado, so I've got cooking skills. I can definitely do that. And Callie goes, yeah, I'm interested in being a program director, because she had, her original plan was she had taken some time to work for recreational Christian kind of recreational ed, spiritual. Christian recreation. I'm blanking on what it's actually called, but doing like programs where you run upward bound basketball, or doing some just being in charge of kind of the rec ministry. That's it, recreational ministry. And so she's like, oh yeah, I'd be interested in doing a program thing. And so So I sent my resume, Callie sent her resume, and we said, hey, we're interested. So sent that in. We did a phone interview. I can't remember. I think Callie and I may have done separate phone interviews. And then, and this was, a lot longer before remote work, but we did our interviews, and the director was like, yeah, why don't you guys come up? We'll do an in-person interview. So that would have been like 20 days later, roughly. So we went from not having a job, where we thought I thought I was going to have a job, went from not having a job to having a new opportunity where we were flying out of Abilene or maybe we flew out of DFW, I don't know, flying out to Chicago, which neither of us have really had been to, in January. Favorite story is, here we are in the airplane. I'm on the window seat. Callie's in the middle seat. There's a lady sitting next to us. And as we come into the airport, there's these huge mounds of dirty black snow. And Callie goes, oh my gosh, there's snow. And I was like, yeah. And the lady next to us was like, you guys aren't from here, are you? We hate that snow. Because by the time what you learn, if you live any length of time in Illinois, is that what happens when you have these big snows is that they take these tractors and they push them up into kind of big, basically mounds, and then that snow stays around, and so it collects all the smog and dirt and just turns dark and black, and it's not good snow, and it'll just stay until it gets warm enough to melt it away. And so it's not pretty and it's not wonderful, but for two kids from Texas who had rarely seen snow cover the ground, it was quite exciting, to say the least. And so we got here, and it was so cold. Loved it, but it was so cold. The two things that I learned about being cold. Number one is that in the South, I never had to own a pair of mittens or gloves because it never got cold enough for my hands to hurt. However, it didn't take me long being in Chicago and then at the camp to be outside and realize that I was going to have some good gloves or mittens, because if not, the cold would literally hurt my hands. And then also the second thing we learned was that we needed bigger coats. We didn't even we had to get big ski jackets, because the jackets that we had, the coats that we had, were not big enough for the north. We just didn't need that in Texas. It got cold, but it didn't get cold. So we flew into Chicago. The director picked us up. We rode back. It's about 2.5 hours to camp from the airport. So we rode back. We got to hang out, kind of did a tour of camp, got to hang out with the camp families. We did an interview process. So that was like a Thursday, Friday night. Saturday, we went into Peoria and met some kids who were part of the ministry. And Saturday night, we didn't know that we were going to be offered the job. I mean, we felt like they flew us out, that was kind of going to be, it was pretty obvious that that's where we were headed, right? That was, although, with my track record. But that's where we were headed. And Callie and I were talking about it, and she's like, I don't want to be the program director. I think I just want to be the cook. And I was like, well, I can do whatever, so that's cool. Yeah, sure. I'll be the program director, and you be the cook. And so the next morning, Sunday morning, we're about to go back, be dropped off at O'Hare so that we can fly back to Texas. We say, hey, and talk to the director, said, hey, just a little switcheroo on you. But Paul's going to do the program and Callie's going to be the cook. And he was really okay with that. I think they were just they were so desperate for a couple. They were desperate for at some point, they were desperate for pulses. But we were at least, had a little bit more than that. And so, yeah, we said, this is what we want to do. And so we got dropped off. We flew back to Texas. We hung around for a while. And eventually we were offered the job. So we said yes. So that was the end of January. We ended up saying, all right, we'll come up in about 4 weeks, roughly. In the meantime, because there's some paperwork and all that stuff had to work out. In the meantime, we were going to move into a double wide trailer. So we looked at it. We're like, okay, we kind of know we're going to put our stuff. And in that interim period, the parsonage that was being basically allowing camp to use, the pastor who had his own house, so he wasn't using the parsonage, passed away. And so the church was like, hey, we're probably going to need that parsonage back. And so the camp lost that. So we get an email or a call that was like, hey, so you guys aren't going to move into the trailer, the double wide trailer. You guys are going to move into a 2-bedroom apartment slash kitchen, dining room, living room thing. That's in the that was next door to the office of the camp. I mean, literally, we would walk out our door into the office of the camp, and it was the bottom floor of the house where the maintenance ropes course guy, lived above us with his wife and 3 kids. And they're like, and we didn't even really get to see that, but we're like, yeah, that's fine. We'll move into that. And so we did. Packed all our stuff into a big U-Haul and drove up to Central Illinois. And had one of the worst experiences. First night being in Illinois, for Cali anyway. We went to a restaurant that we were like, yeah, we're just gonna eat out. So we went to a little town that's near the camp. We went to this restaurant, and I got the most ridiculous thing that is in the Central Illinois area, which is a pork tenderloin. And if you've never had one, well, what they do is they take a tenderloin that's usually this kind of rounded thing, and they pound it out super flat. And when you pound out something like that super flat, it becomes like a hubcap. And then what they take that and they put that on your plate, and then they put a regular hamburger bun, and so it just kind of sits in the middle of it like a tiny hat. And they go, there you go. And so I was like, this is amazing. But Callie, who, when you were in the South, she liked fried fish. And so she saw on the menu that there was a fried catfish. And I'm fairly certain that what they did with this fish was basically dip it in batter. Not taking, there was no scales removed. The eyes were still there. Everything's still there. Dipped it in batter, put it in the fryer, put it on the plate. It was not good. If you don't like fishy tasting fish, yeah, this was not good. So we split my tenderloin because, quite frankly, I had more than enough, and so it was I guess an omen maybe to move into camp. I don't know. So that was kind of a fun story of just the differences. And in the South, when you think catfish fillets, you think like cornbread and fried, and this was the whole catfish. Deep, some kind of batter fried. So yeah, it's just kind of a culture shock there. We moved in, got settled, everything, and we immediately that next day we left to go to a conference. 3 days later we came back, and we spent a day and a half cleaning out the freezer that had malfunctioned, and all of the food had spoiled. So that was like, welcome to camp. Who knows what's going to happen? And to be honest, we were living day by day, month by month at that time, because again, we had thought, hey, we're going to go be a pastor over here. We thought Paul's going to get this pastor position, and that's what we're going to do. And then that door closed, and then they're like, all right, we're going to do this camp thing. But we're like, well, that's not really ever been in our purview of like, yeah, that's a life goal. That's a life stop that we planned on doing. And so we were just taking it day by day, month by month. The camp itself was in pretty dire straits because of the economy at that time. The gas had gone up so high. One of the big companies here, Caterpillar, had frozen any kind of internship hiring, and that was one of the big contracts that the camp got at the time, was that they would bring out all of these CAT interns, and so we lost big contracts, and so we spent our first little bit of life at camp wondering if the camp itself was even going to make it. And it did. God was good. But one of the big lessons we learned through that, because we were newly married, I mean, very, very young married, 1 or 2 years in, right? And we learned that we don't work together very well as far as careers go. Some people can, some people can't. I Love the fact that my wife can go and work at a school, substitute whatever she does. Love that. And I will go do my thing. And then we'll come home. We'll see each other. And I love spending time with her. But it just was not, for our relationship, it was not the right thing for us to work together. And we figured that out over the 3 years. Again, there were some rough times. It was very stressful. Also, if you've never lived in the same place that you work and you can't ever get away from that, yeah. And that has its own set of problems. And so, yeah. So we learned that. But it was just one of those things of, you're trying to figure out, God, what are you doing? What are we supposed to do? God, we just want to serve you. God, we just want, that's what we want to do. And we thought we were headed towards San Angelo. Every egg in that basket, counting them before they hatch. It seemed there was nothing that would change that. And then one day it changed. And what do you do? And then 3 weeks later, we were headed to being hanging out in Illinois. Neither one of us had ever even imagined leaving Texas and living somewhere else. It just wasn't on our radar. And then in 3 weeks, it changed. Everything changed. And that's just the way it is sometimes. Sometimes you think you have it figured out and you don't. Sometimes you think you know what God's telling you, and then you figure out that you're not right. Not that you misheard, but that things changed. That you were headed in the right direction, but then that direction got changed. And it's hard. It's hard because I look back and you think about all the difference that it could have been. And you think about, wow, okay. Well, Paul, if you want to be a pastor, there's kind of a progression, and I was in that, right? I was part-time pastoring, getting my master's in Divinity, and I was going to move into a full-time pastorate. I was going to be a pastor, and that's what I was going to do with my life. Super excited about that. And then just full stop. God said no. The people of that church said no. For whatever reason, I'll never know. Maybe in heaven, God will take a moment to explain it all to me, but I don't know. I can speculate. I can tell you what I think, but it didn't work out. And life just kind of became a series of, God, okay, wherever you want me to go. So we did 3 years at camp, and then we went back to Texas. I did 3 years as a youth minister, music minister. And that was hard, because again, we went where the places where we felt God was opening the doors. We went, and it just wasn't a great culture, church. There's just a lot of things that were not good. And I was not smart enough to ask the right questions. Or at least, and also then there was just people who didn't, who could have given me information who chose not to. And I'm not even going to get into that, but it was just hard. And so 3 years there, we God opened the door to come back to camp. And Callie absolutely loves living at camp, and I do too. I mean, it's pretty awesome to be able to kind of live in a place where you can just go out and walk and you're in nature, a few steps from your front door. It's a community like no other. And that's awesome, kind of inbuilt, self-built community. And our best friends still work there. One of them is Jim. And Callie is good friends with his wife. So it's just such a good place. But it hasn't led the paths of and so what I've done with my life, why I'm not a pastor, get back to the topic of this, is that it's just not what God has for me. I have the education. I have some of the experience. I've worked at camp and was basically a camp pastor. Um, I've volunteered at churches. I've used my gifts in that way, leading music and preaching. And now I work at a ministry where a lot of those same gifts, I still, I use the music. I lead worship for staff meetings at times. I use the same pastor gifts, but I'm just not it's just not the traditional idea of what people consider ministry for a pastor. And that's okay. Cause it's where God has me. And that's the only place I want to be. And if God says, hey, pick up your stuff and move, we will again. Poor Callie, she's moved way too many times probably. We've gotten real good at it, and we're real good at not keeping stuff because we're ready to respond. One of the things that we have about our life is that we want to be where God wants us to be, and we're ready to respond to that wherever He might lead us. That's one of the things that we agree about in being married, is that we want to be where God wants us to be. And so that continues to be the prayer. One of the reasons I started the podcast was to be a creative place for me to kind of use some of those gifts that I have with talking about God. And one of the reasons that I write for Pathos.com on the Unbroken Ground on my blog there is so that I can use some of the gifts that I have because I don't want to be... I was using them. I continue to use them, but these are some more creative outlets where I'm using the gifts, the education that I have, and hopefully that it's a blessing to some people. It doesn't have to be 8 million or trillion or billion people. It can be 30 or 5 or 1. And as long as that's honoring God, that's what I want to do. So yeah, that's why I'm not a pastor. That's because God directed me down a different path. And I said yes. And He's never taken me back. There's been times that I've gotten close. He's never taken me back that path to being a pastor. There have been times that I've gotten close, but it just hasn't worked out. It didn't happen. And so for me, and I hope you hear that as an encouragement, is that God, that I feel that I'm following God to the best of my ability, and God is pleased with what I'm doing. And He wants to see me to use my gifts. And so that's what I do. I look around and I find ways to use my gifts, and I try to impact the kingdom wherever I might be. And I don't have to be paid full-time to do that or part-time. I don't have to be paid at all because doing work for God doesn't require that. I hope you found maybe this one a little bit funny, a little bit interesting in places, but just, the story of how I ended up in Illinois, how I ended up at camp. It's as simple as that and complex as that following God and just listening and trying to figure out, God, what is it you want me to do? And then I'm going to do it. I hope that's your prayer too. I hope that you're finding ways to serve and minister in the way with the skills and the gifts and the talents that you have, the resources that you have, wherever you might be, and that you would be encouraged to do that more and more each day. Next week, I'm going to be jumping into some more. I won't be talking about me so much, but more just some getting close to the end, but just about Jesus and the Bible. But I wanted to kind of do a quick series through just kind of explain a little bit about my life and how I got to be who I am. And what I again, it's not all the way up to modern day. So there's some things thrown there that I didn't talk about, but it's at least a good idea of this is why I am where I am and who I am and what I do. Hope that you find some blessing in that. Hope that you find some encouragement in that. And I hope you have a great week. Hope to hear you. Hope to see you or have you hear me again coming up next week. God bless.